Hello, everybody. Steve Hassan, Dr. Steve Hassan, cult expert, checking in with my weekly live stream. Thanks to my team, and thanks for tuning in. And for those of you who aren't live, you will be watching this on video. I've never been more optimistic in months than I feel right now. But there's, as usual, an incredible amount of things to talk about. And I guess I want to focus on the militaristic bombing and killing of innocent civilians in the boats, and the Hegseth, accusation, and Senator Mark Kelly speaking out with other people who have served their country in the military and the intelligence forces, saying that, everyone is sworn to follow the Constitution and you are committed to not following unlawful orders. And of course, Trump is doing a Nixon and basically says anything I say is lawful because I'm the president. Only that's not what the Constitution says. And people still need to think and reason. And we have a long history of, rules of engagement. And when people are clinging to a boat in the middle of the water, defenseless, and someone says to kill them, that sounds like murder to me. And this whole action with our military is being done without congressional approval. And there's a lot of people very upset, especially veterans. And I'm happy about it. And we want to keep up the pressure, especially on the GOP that is watching a Donald Trump fall asleep at his cabinet meeting, where everyone is doing the sycophantic, bow to the demagogue, like a North Korean cabinet meeting. And it's so obvious more and more. And I also want to just emphasize that I wrote The Cult of Trump. It came out in 2019. And I said that the main puppet master was Russia. And finally, a lot of Americans are watching the behavior of Witkoff and Kushner with Putin. And everybody seems to now be realizing that Trump is beholding to Putin. And I'm hearing more and more people stating Russian collusion. And I'm just remembering back to the Mueller report and how much brainwashing was being done through the social media and media. Russian hoax, to which I was saying bullshit. Russian coup. And what's going to get more Americans mobilized, along with the rising costs of foodstuffs and such, is people realizing that Trump's a traitor. And therefore, everyone who is bending the knee to Trump, following him blindly, needs to be kicked out of office. And so there was a real shift in Tennessee. The Republican won, but not by the previous 22 points, but by 2 points. And it's showing how many Americans don't want to lose their health care. They don't want what's being granted as a tax break to the billionaire class. People are getting really pissed off. And fortunately, there's organizations that are mobilizing people to protest in the streets. I want to just make an appeal to people that this is not a sprint. This is a long haul effort. So you have to pace yourself. And that means not following the news 10 hours a day, but pick and choose your news sources and such, dedicate some time to messaging. But let's put the focus on the family friends of GOP politicians and the billionaire class. If you know anybody in the families of Musk or Zuckerberg, of Altman, of Bezos, of Ellison, etc. And I also wanted to just talk about how much China loves to continue not being in the spotlight, letting Russia and the Ukraine be in the spotlight. But in the meantime, China is hacking Americans' minds with their free AI apps. And I really want to appeal to people to please understand that if you're not paying for it, your data makes you the product. I saw a attorney general, I forget of what state, talking about a Chinese app called Temu. I think it's Temu, and how dangerous it is, and how every Chinese app is feeding information to the Chinese government, who's gathering this information on us in order to then use AI to manipulate our minds. And I saw a clip of President Obama yesterday, and they were asking him what does he rely on for the news. And it was really interesting because he said, I'm an old-fashioned guy, and I read the newspaper, and I read periodicals, and I don't do doom scrolling. And I want to learn my facts from reputable sources. And I haven't seen any other politician or former politician being so overt, just saying, information is the food that we use to think, and we really have to curate our palate. And there's just so much junk being thrown at us all the time. And I know I have a team, and they're putting out, videos. I'm duetting different sites on Oprah, the Arrangement podcast show that she did, just because I really felt like the whole topic of brainwashing, mind control, cults, undue influence was completely ignored in a discussion. And it is a central feature of estrangement, in my professional opinion, in the United States. Not a single person mentioned how people are blocking either their woke, quote unquote, woke relatives or their MAGA relatives. And and I've been singing the song of, look, we're human beings and we need trust, and we should be reaching out respectfully to our family and our friends and maintaining a warm connection and asking questions and working on our active listening. And I hear from some people who say, listen, you don't understand. They abuse me. And I want to state categorically, I'm not for encouraging anyone to allow themselves to be abused. I'm not encouraging anyone who was sexually assaulted or beaten or tortured by a family member to be in touch and build warm relationships if the person has been in therapy and demonstrated a radical positive shift. But cutting off from one person or two people is not cutting off from your entire family and friendship group. And that's where the red flags come out. So we did a Psychology Today blog this week. Come and check out my video posts, especially on Instagram. And I've spoken out over the years on the topic of cancel culture and how I am against it in the right as the left. And a lot of people say it's just on the left. And I'm like, no, it's absolutely being demonstrated by Trump and the right. Every time he wants to censor people, fire them, get them canceled. This is cancel culture. And I quoted Robert Lifton's Dispensing of Existence, one of his 8 criteria of Chinese communist brainwashing. And it's an issue where I think we need to come back to the fundamentals of each person is a unique human being. Don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. And that we have to come back to the notion that America has a lot of people from many different countries, many different religious backgrounds, and we have to stand up for our black and brown citizens and friends that are being persecuted by ICE. And this whole militarization thing, I think we all have fear that if Trump believes that he will lose the midterm elections in 2026, he's just going to declare martial law. And he may order the military against the enemy within, meaning American citizens who don't like him. And we need to be talking to our family and friends in the military now and ask them the question, would they follow an unlawful order to be dispersed against American citizens? And I want to just emphasize Putin invaded Ukraine. This is a fact. And when we only did sanctions back in 2014, when he invaded Crimea, he did a whole psychological warfare thing. And then he followed it up with the military. We did sanctions. Europe did sanctions. Did it stop Putin? No. And now Putin is trying to do a reversal and say he's prepared to go to war against all of the EU. So understand, you don't stop a bully by placating and appeasing. It just doesn't work. And Europe is now realizing they can't trust Trump to do the right thing, to support Ukraine. And they are smelling the coffee and waking up. And I've been saying we're in World War III. We're under psychological warfare attack from without and within. And the way out of this mess is mass psychoeducation. So that's my lane. And I'm begging people, read The Cult of Trump, read my books, take my courses, come on my Substack, Stephen Hassan, subscribe, come on YouTube, subscribe. I have a fascinating interview with John Atack about Nazism and Nazi occultism and the whole myth of the Aryan race and eugenics and its connections with Scientology and Trump. Check it out. It's on all the audio podcasts on the Midas Touch Network, and it's in my YouTube and my Substack. It's very, very relevant. And we have a fascinating guest next week who's talking about gender fluidity, Lisa Diamond, professor in Utah. You're going to love that one too. So I've been opining for 15. I think it's time to start taking questions from my audience. Let's see. Question: is it possible in the Donald leader of the cult to make him totally responsible for the war crimes of murdering over 80 foreigners? Is it possible? Sure. But the question is, the Federalist Society put in 6 right-wing judges who have been giving him so much leeway. I can't believe that they basically gave him immunity to some of the things that he's been doing. And I'm not sure that they're going to get a spine. And I see a super chat for $20 from NRXY. Thank you so much. So let's focus everybody on where each individuals, we need to do a bottom up effort. We need to think each day what's within our control to do. And it may be just one person that we spend time with to make a connection with, reach out with, share something, listen to them. And if you have a platform with lots of followers, you can do more. And I am being asked to be on some big platforms coming up. So I'm very excited to be asked to be on platforms. I have to admit that when Oprah did her show on estrangement, I wanted her to invite me to be on her podcast and talk about brainwashing, mind control, and the cult of Trump. Not holding my breath, especially because I met Oprah. I was on her TV show back in 1989. But you never know. And if you're fans of big influencers, please message them and say, hey, have Dr. Steve Hassan on and ask him about this or that. And maybe we can get a little bit more amplitude on my messaging that we're human beings and our minds can get hacked and there's recovery. Let's see, we have a Substack message from Bernadine. But the Supreme Court gave Trump immunity, and he just says to his surrogates, if you do something criminal, I'll pardon you. I'm afraid you're right. That's the history of what we're seeing so far in the most corrupt, evil administration, certainly in my lifetime of the United States. It is beyond imagination that he's pardoning, Binance CEO, who's a crypto person. He just pardoned a Scientologist, David Chantilly, who was sentenced to 7 years for defrauding $1.5 billion from his investors, and Gentili served 7 days. It's like if you have money and give him money, then get out of jail. And it's just shocking. If you haven't found Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney for the White House, I like to listen to her posts because she's always, as an attorney with a historical, ethical orientation, I always like listening to her. And I always like to listen to Heather Cox Richardson, the historian from Boston College. She's another regular. Oh, and a shout out to Aaron Parnas, who got named Forbes 30 under 30. I listen to Aaron's mini posts on updates. I find being a lawyer, Aaron always wants to not overstate or understate what the facts are. Just say it as it is. And I think that's why in a year he's become so successful. Let's see, Focus Lady. What is the most effective way to supportively speak with people in the top of the cult hierarchy? And does the intervention technique differ when speaking to people in lower levels of cults? It all depends on who you are and what your relationship is to someone high up in the group or in lower levels. It always pays to focus on somebody that you have some kind of a relationship with, and yeah, and there are techniques. I've been recording some videos with my guy Jim, who is I don't know if you get my once a week newsletter. Came out yesterday, but Jim is raising some money to shoot a movie of a screenplay he wrote called The Cult of Us. about two people in two different cults who fall in love, and it's a comedy, romantic comedy. So I'm encouraging that. But back to your, I shot some short videos of how not to talk to somebody and how to talk to somebody in a way that's likely to be more effective. But just think, the goal isn't to attack the leader, the doctrine, or the group, or be logical or rational and win an argument. That doesn't work. It backfires almost universally. What does work is to be warm, respectful, curious, and ask questions, be a good listener, mirror back what you heard the person say to verify that you got it right, and ask a follow-up question. Because in the end, I really do believe this is what has worked over the decades. Understanding that brainwashing doesn't erase the person's authentic self. It creates a pseudo identity that captured the person's sense of self. But there's dissonance. The real person is like, I don't like this. I don't like lying. I don't like that Trump is calling women names and Epstein files and everything else. And the cult self saying, be quiet, don't listen to that. But asking questions, especially with Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's a great opportunity to ask the person to watch her statement with you and ask them, what do you think? What points resonate with them? Are there any points that they disagree with? Because I do believe a lot of the GOP is starting to realize Trump is he's demented. He fell asleep at the cabinet meeting. He did 400 posts or something last night when Costco was suing the Trump administration for the tariffs, for the money to get for them because of Trump's tariffs. And he's melting down. Let's see, Confessions of an Ex-Mormon on TikTok. I left the Mormon church and I am starting to realize how much it impacted my behavior and mine. Welcome. Yes, you don't grow up in an authoritarian mind control group and just leave it and not think that there's a lot of deconstructing that you have to do and learning about what's healthy and normal. And when I tell people that most civilized countries have abolished corporal punishment of children, and that the US is one of the few countries where it's legal to beat children and traumatize children, people, if you're in the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witnesses or any number of other groups and you were hit as a child, this is not normal and this is not good for your brain. And it's messaging to you to obey authority or get hit. And that's not what healthy parents do. They want their children to learn and grow and understand rules of ethical conduct and develop empathy and develop the ability to be an individual and not just the clone of their parents. Let's see, I almost went no contact, but my nieces and nephews made me go. I have to stay. Yeah, so that's the thing. When you're born and raised in a group, there's a whole lot of people. And so do we want to stay in a group just to stay connected to our people? I know many people who do that, who make that choice. It's called PMO, physically in, mentally out. Many of whom are stay in because they have young children and they don't want to be alienated from their children, but they don't believe and they find ways to not go to services and do the things and do the tithing, etc. Everyone has to make their own decisions about what's going to work for them. But I can tell you that if you do leave and you do the homework and you get healthy and you have higher education and you have a successful life and you're happy, it's such a powerful message to everybody in. And just because the group is told to shun you doesn't mean you have to agree and shun them back. It means you can say, miss you, let's get together, etc. And yeah, they're going to try to talk you into coming back. And you can just say to them, if you promise not to try to talk me into coming back, I promise I won't talk you into why it's good to leave. And then let's go from there. And let's ask each other's question. Nancy Wallace, my regular, thank you for $5. I think Nancy is literally on every live stream, so I appreciate you, Nancy, and thanks so much. Yeah, and people say, Steve, I can't do it. It's too traumatic to talk to the cult member in my family or the MAGA person. I'm like, then don't. You know, I'm just giving you my opinion based on the belief that people do want to get out, and that if you have the emotional resources and the time to spend, it's really very gratifying because people leave. They really do. Let's see, Pepe, I'm watching from Germany. Unfortunately, your book isn't available here, but I'd like to read it. It's on Amazon. You're talking about The Cult of Trump. It should be available. If it isn't, I would go to your nearest bookstore and ask them to order it, but it should be orderable. I know there's an audio version because I read it myself. And I know there's a German version of my book, Freedom of Mind, that's still in print. We have more stuff coming out in Spanish. I have a Spanish edition of Combating Cult Mind Control. I'm about to go to France to do an interview. And we now have French influence continuums and bite models on my freedomofmind.com website, and looking to get my work out into all the major languages. And what do you think is driving Hegseth? Is it anger, revenge, or resentment? I saw one of his relatives talking about how sick he was and how many times he just was acting out and had to go to the hospital. I think the guy gave 3 or 4 examples of the guy's, an alcoholic. And he's completely unqualified, as is every other cabinet official, is completely unqualified to run a responsible division of our government. And that's part of the Putin and Xi plan. And the Hegseth is just one example, but RFK is another person who's going to cause millions of deaths because of his anti-science, doesn't believe in germ theory, dismantling our pandemic experts, because it's only a matter of time before we have another pandemic. So you can get easily overwhelmed. And my hope, and I'm trying to demonstrate this by the way I live my life, is to just focus each day and do a few major things that I think are going to help others. So I'm doing social media posts, I'm recording things, I'm putting out materials, I'm agreeing to doing podcasts, etc. I want to change the law. I want to educate the public. Let's see. I have seen a few who are troubled by the pardon of Honduran Hernandez, the big cartel, while bombing small boats at the same time. So you're talking about the coke dealer who got pardoned, and Trump is saying we have to kill these people in the small boats because they're smuggling drugs into the United States. First of all, there's no evidence that they're smuggling any drugs. We know that they're certainly not smuggling fentanyl fentanyl, excuse me. We know that China is supplying Mexican cartels with the raw material for fentanyl. And these cartels are bringing the fentanyl into the United States. So what is Trump doing in the Caribbean and off the coast of Venezuela with the aircraft carrier and 15,000 American servicemen? I think that he's acting out his fantasies. I think that he's sending a message that he's going to invade Canada or invade any country that he feels like it. So he's trying to be a Putin, but he's never going to be a Putin. And honestly, I don't think he's even going to make it to 2028. He's melting down quickly. He's really getting demented, and he's old. And our opposition, the people who are pro-democracy, we need to get our messaging aligned, and we need to hammer it over and over and over again. We need to pick what the most important things are. And right now, because we are concerned that Trump's going to try to use the military against the American people, we want a message to the military. And that's why I'm so grateful to generals and other military officials and former servicemen for speaking up. Let's see, what do you think is behind these MAGA wanting to abolish empathy? Why do they hate empathy? It's a great question. And let me just say, as a therapist who has studied human development, especially people born in cults where they're beaten and tortured, like the children of God, or people born and raised in Scientology or Christian nationalism and such, they want obedience. They don't want people to have relations and trust and secure attachment. And malignant narcissists, which is the stereotypical profile of all cult leaders, one of the features is a lack of empathy. So if you're in a position of authority and you don't have empathy for another human being, you treat others as objects there for your benefit, and you hear people messaging about empathy, it's easy to then label it as a weakness and wanting to abolish it. But it's actually the best part of being a human being. It's what's enabled the human species to survive and thrive, is because basically most people are good and most people cooperate with each other and trust each other for common goals. And that's one of the reasons why I'm ultimately hopeful that we're going to get rid of all of these authoritarian bullies and cult leaders, is because there's more of us than there are of them. And that if we work together for common values, but we need a strategy, not just a short-term one, but a long-term one, that we will win. And they will always turn on their own. Did you see what Donald Trump did to Marjorie Taylor Greene when she was pressuring him about the Epstein files? He called her traitor. And it's a demonstration of the fact that when you're in an authoritarian cult, there is no camaraderie. It's obedience. And the minute you question the leader or the doctrine or the policy, you're the enemy. And that's a message to everybody else in the cult, that they're going to turn on you. But guess what? People are turning on him. People are leaving MAGA. They really are. And we want to welcome them. The last thing we want is to shame them. What we want is to welcome them and offer them face saving. And I know there are people who are like, I'm so angry. I want to punch them in the mouth, and I'm never going to let them live it up and all of that. And I'm just like, come on. We need everybody on deck, and especially former members of MAGA, to message to the people who are still in the cult. Hello, have you planned to translate your books for Portuguese? Not yet. We just published a Spanish edition, and it was because we had people saying, we need this. ICE is focusing on Hispanics. There are so many in Latin America. Please do it in Spanish. And I said, please translate the bite model and the influence continuum, my doctoral dissertation. They did it. And I hired an MD who was a former cult member to help me do the Spanish translation. So we need people to do this Portuguese translation. I would welcome that. But from what I understand, there is maybe some understanding of people from Brazil and Portuguese to read Spanish. It's not the same, of course. But let's see, Eileen on Substack, as the populations continue to age, are you seeing an increase in older people, 60s and 70s, leaving cults? Aside from possibly estranged family members, how can they support themselves? I don't know. I only know who contacts me and such. I can tell you one of the members of the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Society, Raymond Franz. He was born in the group, and he left the group in his 60s when he realized they weren't following the Bible, that it was being run like a corporation. And even though he was in his 60s and he had spent his entire life and his entire family was still in the cult, he was like, I just want to follow Jesus and the Bible, and I want to be free. And he was very happy to be out of the cult. So it's never too late. And I really want people to experience what it's like to be able to make up your own mind and make your own decisions and read what you want to read and talk to who you want to talk to. And I just want to remind everybody, especially people who are involved with MAGA, the MAGA people were free speech, right? Until they got power. Then it's like, no free speech. You have to agree with us. We're going to cancel you. It's like, huh? There is no such thing as free speech in my opinion. All speech has responsibilities, and speech should be based on facts and truth and not lies and confabulations. And the principle in law is it's illegal to scream fire in a crowded theater if there is no fire. In other words, if you lie and people have a panic and they get injured, it's a crime. So if there is a fire, then you're responsible to say fire, not to scream it, but to encourage people to exit the theater as soon as possible. Let's see, Patrick on Substack. Vlad Vexler, the political philosopher, believes 47 wants to push the nation into post-truth politics by confusing people with a and not a simultaneous statements. This would be a form of purposeful disorientation for the populace, as is done in Russia. Do you agree? Yes, I do agree. And I'm just going to go back in my evolution to the 80s when I learned something called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, that was developed by Bandler and Grinder, popularized by Tony Robbins, and now many, many other people. And one of the techniques that Erickson, this is what NLP was based on, Milton Erickson, he was a psychiatrist, and his job was helping people who were ill, who came to him, to do no harm and to heal them. But he would use a technique known as the confusion technique. And he would do it in order to get people past a rigid mindset in order to tell stories and to give suggestions that would enable people to have more resourcefulness, to be able to make decisions, to live a better life, etc. But anything that works for the good can be misused for the bad. And if you want to do brainwashing, you want to disorient a person's sense of reality. You want to disorient what's up and what's down, and what's truth and what's not truth. But I am fundamentally grounded in the scientific method. And that's what's enabled humanity to advance to the level that we've been able to advance, is science, not praying in Bible verses, not casting out demons, science, trial and error testing. And corporations have lied and said, oh, there's smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. And we later found out they were just plain lying. The fossil fuel countries and corporations have hired people. They've used my former cult front, the Washington Times, to do climate science denial and say there's no such thing as global warming. Bull. It's just plain bull. And we're seeing these extreme climate events, and we're on one fragile planet, people. And the people who own oil just want power and money, and they don't seem to remember and realize we're all on one planet. And just while we're on this topic, I am not for us putting our consciousness into androids and going to Mars. I'm for preserving the earth and human beings. I'm for human beings having human relationships. Oh, and I see a super chat, $10 from I don't know how to pronounce it, INRXZ, but thank you. And they ask, how similar are narcissists in romantic relationships and narcissists operating cults? So narcissism is on a continuum, and there's healthier versions of narcissism and really bad versions of narcissism. The cult leader profile is what Eric Fromm calls malignant narcissism. And that's the narcissism where the person thinks they're above the law, they're pathological liars, they're sadistic, paranoid, revengeful, threatening. Go to freedomofmind.com, look under Learn Undue Influence, and look at the criteria of Eric Fromm under malignant narcissism. Memorize those qualities, and it's those behaviors. You never want to be in a relationship with a malignant narcissist. You never want one running your company or your country either. It's not going to go well if they have power, because it's all about them servicing the hole in their psyche that they need narcissistic supply. So Nancy Wallace, have you been used in AI generated videos yet? Rick Wilson's are on YouTube, constantly very convincing. I am not aware of my team using AI videos. I have to check out Rick's AI videos. I've been interviewed by Rick and the Lincoln Project in past years. But I want to just say my understanding is AI is getting so sophisticated that if you're seeing people doing AI videos, you should have a level of skepticism. Is this really theirs? Is what they're saying actually true? Is somebody, making something up and slipping something in? So I am now operating when I'm online with a high degree of skepticism about what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing all these experts who I've never heard of, and they have no credentials, giving all these authoritative advice on things. And it's just like, no, nope, sorry. I want real experts with credentials that are verified. If they're going to cite a study at Harvard, give the citation. Let's look it up. As a PhD, I've learned how to analyze whether or not a study is done properly or not. We need to use our critical thinking. Let's see, Greg P. on Substack. What clinical tools are available to treat a person with malignant narcissism that believes mind control is acceptable? What clinical tools are available to treat a person with malignant narcissism? So, the problem with clinical tools and even narcissistic people is they're very resistant to get therapy and to be treated. They think that they don't need it. They don't trust anyone else. They're not willing to make themselves vulnerable unless it's court ordered, or they're going to lose access to their children or something major that might move them to getting treatment. But there has been, because I've been a therapist for decades, there's been a belief system that if you have a personality disorder, cluster B, what's known as a cluster B personality disorder, that there's nothing you can do to fix it. And I had a teacher, forensic psychologist Daniel Brown, who developed a methodology for repairing attachment disorders in adults. And it requires the person enter treatment with a real therapist and do a form of hypnosis where they're going back to key traumatic moments in their childhood and imagining the ideal mother and ideal father uniquely suited to them and what they would have wanted them to say or do. So the idea is to use neuroplasticity and neurogenesis for a person to create a healthy, what's known as a healthy introject of mother and father, as opposed to my parents sucked, or my parents were abusive or alcoholic or missing. But for a person to rewire their sense of self based on the here and now and how they want to be in the future. So there is a methodology available. There's a whole book. There's an online course that my colleague and friend down in Melbourne, Australia, Nigel Denning, has put with David Elliott about attachment repair. The course is primarily for clinicians. And if you want to know more, come to my Substack, look up Nigel Denning, Denning. There are links to his course and his work. But the key thing is people have to be wanting to change. And this brings up another point I want to make, and that is that a lot of people are looking to ChatGPT to be their therapist. Bad idea. This is a large language model, and I would never put my mental health to a chatbot. Not a good idea. Be careful. I'm a big fan of psychoeducation, though. I believe in listening to podcasts by mental health professionals who know what they're doing, or reading books, taking courses. That's good. But seeing a legitimate therapist with experience in the area that you want to work on is the best way to go. Let's see, Cat on Substack, personality disorder and alcoholism. That's what I'm calling. Why aren't more psychologists discussing that Trump meets criteria for antisocial personality disorder? Check out Bandy X Lee's The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, and The More Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, and The Most Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, that's filled with mental health experts naming that Trump is mentally disordered, has a personality disorder. I'm in the last version of these volumes of top psychiatrists and psychologists who say that Donald Trump is not fit for duty, much less to be the most powerful man in the world. And everything Vandy and I have been saying, we've been largely censored by the media. Why? Why isn't the media lifting up mental health experts who can educate the public? That's the big question. Because do they want to keep people ignorant so they can sell them more products or try to manipulate them further? I don't want to be cynical, but that's how it's looking. Let's see. Confessions of an ex-Mormon on TikTok. Do you think the law can ever regulate these cults when the members are seen as having chosen this? That's what I did my doctoral dissertation for, because I wanted to create a model that's scientific for the law to change. And that's why I've created the influence continuum and my bite model of authoritarian control, controlling behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. And it uses trafficking law, which is fraud, force, or coercion. So, yes, that's what I want. I want there to be a clear delineation that ethical religions give informed consent. They respect your individuality, your conscience. They don't tell you what you can read and what you can't read, who you can associate with or not. They don't put phobias in your minds. They don't make you cut off from family and friends. And these unhealthy authoritarian cults that say they're religions, they should lose their tax exemption status. And believe me, they're going to fight like hell not to lose that, because it means billions of dollars of lost revenue. They'll have to start paying taxes on all their property. Ooh, and actually will pay for firemen and policemen and get roads and health care for our citizens. Let's see, Graham Moses on Substack. I was once told, and I've always believed it to be true, that empathy is the highest form of consciousness. Have you ever spoken about Rush Limbaugh? So let me do this in chunks. So empathy, a highest form of consciousness. I would not agree with that. And I also would add that there is such a thing as too much empathy. Like when you are a people pleaser, you are like putting the other person's needs and feelings ahead of your own. So you don't have healthy boundaries between me and others. When I think of higher forms of consciousness, I'm thinking like vertical, where you are able to maintain your core values, but where you can see other people's worldviews and step into their shoes without losing your own. So that's my first comment. About Rush Limbaugh. Yes, Rush Limbaugh was one of the original right-wing extremists on the radio. Dangerous dude who was part of the Tea Party. Not a good actor. Do you consider him to be a cult leader? Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly, we both promoted and put on the air by Roger Ailes. I know. Yeah. And Brian Stelter wrote a book on Fox News about and quoted Roger Ailes in great detail and called it a cult. By the way, there are authoritarian cults on the left, not just the right. And I've had people say, why don't you talk more about left-wing authoritarians? It's like China is the biggest one on planet Earth. The Chinese Communist Party, one of the biggest threats to human freedom. And if you're using Chinese apps, they're gathering your data to manipulate you. They don't allow it on their own citizens, but they're doing it on us. And I saw a 60 Minutes segment where the Chinese are hacking into our infrastructure for water, electrical grids, and other things. Why? Because they want to take over. They want to rule the world. I really believe that. Not good. Jenny Bloom on Substack. How can we help to lift you up given legacy media has failed you guys? Well, at the moment, I'm doing okay, but I'd love to have more funds coming in as subscriptions so that I can get more people to help take my body of knowledge and put out more information, do more courses. And you can help also, like I was mentioning earlier, if you want to contact Oprah Winfrey's people and say you should really do a show on the cult of Trump with Dr. Hassan, who knows, maybe that somebody will actually make that happen. I was on Joe Rogan's show in 2015. He really liked me, invited me back. When I wrote the book, he didn't have me back, and he still isn't having me back, even though he's done other shows on the topic of cults. And there's a bunch of people representing themselves as cult experts out there, but look at their credentials. Were they in a cult? Are they mental health professionals? Have they written best-selling books? Have they been doing the work for 5 decades? There's not a lot of folks like myself. There's a few of us that I highly respect and like and promote. And you can go to my Substack, put cult experts in, and you can see the people that I like. So we're wrapping up for another live stream. I just want to end on a hopeful note because honestly, I think the GOP is freaking out. They're realizing their God is falling apart, and he's ranting and raving and falling asleep, and their constituents are very unhappy. They need to keep hearing from their unhappy constituents. And when the red states, if this goes through, lose their health care, they know that these folks are not going to vote for them. And maybe they're counting on martial law, but we need to prepare ourselves. And the answer is not violence. It's the opposite. It's peaceful protests. Because guess what? They are their own worst enemies, using their own words against themselves. And a shout out for comedians. I love Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart, Fallon. I'm blocking on all the other ones that I love. And podcasters who have some spine, who are willing to talk about the cult of Trump. I've been on some very big podcasts in my career. And for the last few years, these people don't want me back on because it's too controversial. We're past that point. We want to get influencers who are willing to step up. I love Robert De Niro, for example. Robert De Niro, I punch Trump in the mouth. I love that guy. Let's do more together, and let me educate, let me share people. And if you haven't read The Cult of Trump, go to your library if you can't afford it. Seriously, listen to it. I read it. It really is an explanatory framework that's going to help reduce your anxiety, because it's a frame of how to understand what's happened to us. And there is a chapter in there on how to talk to your family and friends who are in MAGA. I want to do a lot more. As I was saying, we've been recording some short videos of what not to do and what to do. Look for those. Come join the Freedom of Mind community. Another plug for my Substack and my YouTube. And I want to thank my team yet again, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.